The cold was the first thing I ever truly understood. It wasn't the gentle chill of a winter's morning, but a deep, biting cold that seeped into your bones and whispered that you were alone. I was 8 years old when my father took me into the heart of the Shadowfang forest. The memory is a scar, forever fresh in my mind. He held my hand, not with the warmth a father should, but with a grip of iron, his fingers like cold shackles around my tiny ones. "Papa, where are we going?" I asked. My voice small against the chorus of the nocturnal creatures. The towering pines seemed to lean in, listening. My breath misted in the air, a tiny cloud of life in the overwhelming darkness. He didn't look at me. His profile was sharp and unyielding against the slivers of moonlight. "You must be brave, Elora," was all he said, and his voice was so hollow it frightened me more than the forest itself. My name, Elora, meant light in the old tongue. It felt like a cruel joke. We stopped in a small, desolate clearing where the moonlight barely touched the frozen ground. The air was still and heavy, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. He finally released my hand, and I instinctively rubbed the feeling back into my fingers. He knelt down, and for a single, heart-soaring moment, I thought he was going to hug me. I leaned forward, a flicker of hope warming my chest. But he just looked at me, his eyes the same shade of stormy gray as mine, holding no love, only a grim finality. "You are defective, Elora," he stated, the words as sharp and cold as shards of ice. "You have no wolf. You are a human stain on our pure bloodline. The Silvermane pack cannot be weakened by your existence." The word defective struck me with a physical force. I had always been smaller, quieter. While the other children's first shifts were celebrated with feasts, my body remained stubbornly, silently human. I was a ghost at the festivities, a living reminder of a flaw in our perfect world. "I'm sorry, Papa," I whispered, tears welling in my eyes, freezing on my lashes. "I'll try harder." "I promise." He stood up, his immense frame blocking out the moon. "There is no trying. There is only what is. To protect the pack, you must be removed." And then he turned. He simply turned and walked away. His footsteps crunched on the frost, each one a hammer blow to my fragile heart. I stood there, frozen not just by the cold, but by a terror so profound it stole my breath. I watched his back, the broad shoulders I used to ride on, disappear into the thick, menacing darkness of the trees. "Papa?" My voice was a whimper, lost in the wind. "Papa, don't leave me. I'll be good, I promise." Silence. He was gone. The forest, once just a backdrop to my nightmare, now became the entire world. It was a living, breathing monster, and I was a morsel left for it. The sounds magnified. The snap of a twig was a beast lunging. The hoot of an owl was a demon's cry. I wrapped my fan arms around myself, my entire body shaking uncontrollably. I was defective. I was nothing. And I was alone. I sank to the frozen ground, the cold seeping through my clothes, and I did the only thing an 8-year-old could do. I cried until I had no tears left, my sobs the only offering to the uncaring night. I was sure I would die there, but the dawn, weak and pale, eventually came, and with it, a will I didn't know I possessed flickered to life deep inside my soul. It was a small, defiant spark. I would not die here. I would survive. For what? I didn't know. But the spark was there, and it was mine. Little did I know, that very spark of defiance would one day become a flame that would shake the foundations of the very world that had cast me out. For the forest did not claim me that night. Instead, it would become my first and greatest teacher. And the greatest lesson was yet to come. Survival was a silent, brutal teacher. That first dawn, the cold had sunk so deep into my bones, I thought I had become a creature of ice. But the rising sun, weak as it was, offered a sliver of warmth. It was enough. I pushed myself up from the frozen ground, my limbs stiff and protesting. My father's words, defective, echoed in my mind. But now they sparked something new, a flicker of anger. Was I truly so worthless that I wasn't even worth a quick, merciful end? I decided then that I would not give him the satisfaction. I would live. The forest was vast and unforgiving. Hunger became a constant, gnawing companion. I found berries I recognized from my mother's lessons, tart and barely nourishing. I drank from icy streams, my hands turning red and raw. I learned to move silently, to become a shadow among the trees, because the forest was full of eyes, and most of them belonged to things that saw me as prey. I found a hollow beneath the roots of a great, ancient oak. It was damp and dark, but it shielded me from the worst of the wind. This became my home. My days fell into a desperate rhythm. Hunt for food, find water, avoid the larger predators. I was small and fast. And my lack of a wolf's scent seemed to confuse the forest creatures. They saw a human child, but smelled something else, something faint and unidentifiable. It was my only advantage. One evening, as I was trying to catch a fish with my bare hands in a shallow creek, I heard a low, pained whimper. My instinct screamed at me to run, to hide. But the sound was so full of suffering, it rooted me to the spot. Cautiously, I crept towards the source, behind a thicket of thorns. A magnificent she-wolf was trapped. A heavy, jagged branch had fallen, pinning her hind leg. Her silver-gray fur was matted with blood, and her golden eyes were glazed with pain and exhaustion. She was a creature of pure, wild grace, and she was dying. Our eyes met. I expected to see aggression, a feral snap of teeth. But instead, I saw a deep, intelligent wariness. She was a wolf of the wildwood, not of a pack, a lone hunter. And in that moment, we recognized the same solitude in each other. I didn't have the strength to move the branch, but I couldn't leave her. I spent the next 2 days bringing her water in a large leaf, chewing berries into a pulp and gently placing them near her mouth. I spoke to her in a soft, steady voice, telling her about the stars, about the silly games the pack children used to play, about my hollow under the oak tree. I told her I was defective. She never tried to bite me. On the 3rd day, a group of rogue wolves, scrawny and desperate, caught the scent of blood. They surrounded us, their lips pulled back in savage snarls. The she-wolf tried to rise, a weak growl rumbling in her chest, but she was too weak. This was it. I had survived my father, the cold and the hunger, only to be torn apart. A strange calm settled over me. I was not a wolf, but I was not nothing. I stepped in front of the injured she-wolf, placing my small, fragile body between her and the rogues. I looked the lead wolf straight in its yellow eyes, and a surge of pure, defiant will erupted from within me. I did not shout. I did not snarl. I simply stood my ground and whispered, "No." A ripple went through the air. It was invisible, but I felt it. The lead wolf stopped in its tracks. Its head cocked in confusion. It sniffed the air, whined, and then, to my utter astonishment, it took a step back. The others followed suit, and within moments, they had melted back into the forest. The silence they left behind was deafening. I turned back to the she-wolf. Her golden eyes were fixed on me, wide with something that looked like awe. That night, a storm rolled in. The wind howled and the rain fell in sheets. I huddled against the she-wolf's warm body, sharing what little warmth we had. The next morning, the storm had passed, and with a final, monumental effort, she managed to wrench her leg free from the broken branch. She stood, unsteady but alive. She limped over to me and nudged my hand with her massive head, a gesture of thanks, and then she turned and disappeared into the trees. I thought that was the end of it, but the following day she returned. And she was not alone. She led me to a hidden cave deep within a rocky outcrop, safe and dry. And she brought me food, a freshly caught rabbit. Her name, I learned in the way one learns things in the wild, was Lyra. She became my guardian, my family. She taught me the deeper secrets of the forest, which plants could heal, which could kill, how to read the weather in the clouds, and how to speak the silent language of the wild. Under her care, I did not just survive. I grew strong. The defective human child was being forged into something else entirely, and I began to feel a strange, dormant power sleeping within me, waiting for its time to wake. The day Lyra did not return from her hunt, my world shattered for the second time. I searched for days, but all I found was a patch of scorched earth and the scent of a strange, aggressive pack. They had taken her. The spark of defiance inside me, once a flicker, now roared into a cold, hard flame. The forest had taught me how to live. Now it was time to learn how to fight. The years that followed Lyra's disappearance were different. The loneliness returned, but it was a sharper, more focused thing. I was no longer a scared child. I was a young woman honed by loss and wilderness. My home was the cave Lyra had shown me, and my purpose was to become strong enough to find her. To find the pack that had taken her. I pushed my body to its limits, running for miles, climbing treacherous cliffs, swimming in the coldest streams. My senses, though human, became preternaturally sharp. I could hear a leaf fall 100 paces away, smell rain hours before it arrived, and see perfectly in mere total darkness. The forest had gifted me its own kind of power. I began to venture closer to the territories I knew belonged to wolf packs. I would watch them from the shadows, high in the trees or concealed by thick foliage. I saw their patrols, their hierarchies, their celebrations. I saw the brutal strength of their alphas and the quiet power of their lunas. And I saw the way they treated those they considered weak, outsiders. It made my blood run cold. One day, while tracking a deer, I stumbled upon a scene that froze the very air in my lungs. A young wolf, no older than I had been when I was abandoned, was being cornered by two larger, brutish pack members. He was scrawny, and his wolf form was patchy and thin. They were taunting him, shoving him, calling him a runt, a waste of space. The memory of my own father's words, defective, screamed in my head. I didn't think. I moved with a silence and speed that was now second nature. I didn't confront them. I became the forest itself. I threw my voice, mimicking the deep, threatening growl of a massive mountain cat from the thicket behind the bullies. They spun around, their bravado vanishing into fear. While they were distracted, I dropped a small, perfectly aimed stone from a branch above, hitting the larger one square on the nose. He yelped in surprise and pain. Convinced they were under attack by some unseen predator, the two bullies turned and fled, their tails between their legs. The young runt stood alone, panting and confused. I dropped silently to the ground in front of him. He flinched, expecting another attack, but I just looked at him, my storm-gray eyes calm. "You are not a waste of space," I said, my voice low but clear. "Your strength is different. That does not make it less." His eyes, wide and fearful, met mine. He gave a small, hesitant whine, then shifted into his human form, a boy with messy brown hair and frightened eyes. "Who are you?" he whispered. "A friend," I said simply. "Now run home. And remember, your worth is not theirs to decide." He nodded, a new light in his eyes, and scurried away. That small act of defiance lit a new path for me. I couldn't take on an entire pack alone, not yet. But I could be a ghost in the shadows, a protector of the weak and the outcast. I became a whispered legend among the smaller, oppressed members of the border packs. They spoke of a spirit of the wildwood. A human-like creature with the eyes of a storm and the heart of a wolf, who appeared from nowhere to aid those in need. I never stayed. I never gave my name. I was a rumor, a myth. It was during this time that I first heard the name of the pack that had taken Lyra. A Bloodfang pack. They were known for their brutality and their expansionist ambitions. Their alpha, Kalen, was spoken of in fearful tones. A ruthless, powerful leader who showed no mercy. The cold flame of my purpose burned brighter. My path was leading me toward him. One crisp autumn evening, as I was following the trail of a Bloodfang patrol, I found something I did not expect. A man, lying unconscious and badly wounded at the base of a ravine. He was dressed in simple, dark clothes, not the leather armor of a warrior. His scent was complex, wolf, but unlike any I had encountered. It was wild, ancient, and carried a profound sense of loneliness. Much like my own, my every instinct told me to leave him. He was a wolf. He was the enemy. But the memory of Lyra, wounded and trapped, was too strong. I could not leave him to die. I spent hours carefully moving him. using a makeshift traveway to a hidden cave I used near a hot spring. I cleaned his wounds with the herbs Lyra had taught me. I stitched the deepest gashes with a bone needle and sinew, and I fed him water and broth when he was too weak to wake. For 3 days, I tended to him. On the 4th day, I returned from foraging to find him awake. He was sitting up, his back against the cave's wall, and his eyes were open. They were the color of amber, and they held a depth and an intelligence that was startling. He was watching me, not with aggression, but with a calm, intense curiosity. "You," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "The spirit of the wildwood." "I did not expect you to be real." I froze at the entrance of the cave, my hand instinctively going to the hunting knife at my belt. "And I did not expect to find a bloodfang warrior so far from his territory," I replied. My voice cold. A faint, tired smile touched his lips. It transformed his stern, handsome face. "I am no bloodfang. My name is Rylan. I am the alpha of the Stormcrest pack." My breath hitched. Stormcrest. They were a reclusive pack, said to live in the high, inaccessible mountains. They were legends themselves, known for their wisdom and their neutrality. And this man, Rylan, was their alpha. I had saved an alpha, and he knew the legend of the wildwood spirit. The world I had carefully navigated from the shadows was suddenly, dangerously illuminated. The air in the cave grew thick with unspoken questions. Rylan, Rylan. The alpha of Stormcrest continued to watch me, his amber eyes missing nothing. He took in my worn, practical clothing, my calloused hands, the quiet confidence in my stance that spoke of a life lived far from any pack. "You have my gratitude," he said. His voice still weak but laced with undeniable authority. The Bloodfang ambush would have been my end. "The Bloodfang?" I asked. My interest piqued despite my caution. I moved to the other side of the cave, keeping a safe distance as I began to prepare more poultices. "They grow bold," he said, a grimace of pain crossing his face as he shifted his weight. "Their alpha, Kalen, seeks to dominate all the surrounding territories." He attacked my patrol as we surveyed his borders. I stayed behind to ensure my betas escaped. He was an alpha who would sacrifice himself for his pack. The concept was so foreign to me, it was almost laughable. My own father had sacrificed his daughter. "Why would a spirit of the wildwood save a wolf?" Rylan asked, his gaze piercing. "The stories say you only help the weak and the outcast." I focused on grinding the herbs. A rhythmic sound, a comfort. Perhaps the stories are incomplete, or perhaps I simply dislike bullies. A low, genuine chuckle escaped him, though it turned into a cough. "A noble sentiment. But you risked much. If the Bloodfang had found you with me, they won't find us here," I stated with a certainty I felt in my bones. This was my domain. He was silent for a long moment. "You are not what I expected. You move like a wolf. You smell of the deep woods and something else. Something old, but you have no wolf." The statement hung in the air, a familiar condemnation. I stopped my work and finally met his gaze directly. "No, I do not. My own pack cast me out for it when I was a child. They left me in the Shadowfang forest to die." I saw the shock in his eyes, a flicker of something that looked like outrage. "What pack?" he demanded, his alpha instincts surfacing. "That is a crime against our most basic laws." "A pack that no longer matters," I said, turning away to hide the old pain. "The forest is my pack now." Over the next few days, as Rylan regained his strength, a tentative, strange alliance formed. He was sharp, strategic, and surprisingly kind. He spoke of his pack not as subjects, but as family. He spoke of his late parents, wise leaders who had taught him that true strength lay in protection, not domination. He was everything my father was not, and I, in turn, found myself telling him things I had never spoken aloud. I told him about Lyra, about my years alone, about the small acts of rebellion against the packs that mirrored the one that had cast me out. He listened, truly listened, without judgment. "This power you feel sleeping within you," he said one evening as we shared a simple meal of roasted roots and rabbit. "You say it woke when you faced the rogue wolves to protect Lyra. And when you faced danger to protect others." I nodded, staring into the small fire. "It feels like a deep well, but I cannot draw from it at will. It only comes in moments of great need." "That is the nature of true power," Rylan mused. "It is not a weapon to be brandished, but a shield to be raised. Your lack of a wolf may not be a defect, Alara. It may be a vessel for something entirely different." Hearing him say my name, and not in a tone of pity or disgust, sent a strange warmth through me. No one had ever suggested I was anything but broken. When he was strong enough to travel, I guided him to the edge of Stormcrest territory. We stood at the tree line, looking out at the majestic, snow-capped mountains that were his home. "Come with me," he said. Turning to me, the offer was simple, but it felt monumental. To Stormcrest, you would be safe, honored. My heart ached with a longing I hadn't allowed myself to feel in over a decade. A home, a place to belong. But I looked back toward the dark expanse of the Wildwood and the lands of the Bloodfang. Lyra was still out there, and the cold flame of my purpose had not dimmed. "I cannot," I said softly, my voice thick with emotion. "My path lies elsewhere. The Bloodfangs still hold my friend, and there are others like that young boy, who need the spirit of the Wildwood." Rylan's expression was one of deep respect, not disappointment. "Let our paths be allies." He reached into a small pouch at his belt and pulled out a smooth, dark stone etched with a swirling rune. "This is a token of the Alpha of Stormcrest. If you are ever in need, hold this and call my name. My pack will find you." I took the stone. It was warm from his touch. "Thank you." Rylan. He gave me one last long look, his amber eyes holding a promise I couldn't quite decipher. "Until we meet again, Elara of the Wildwood." And then he was gone, moving with an alpha's grace into the mountains. I stood there for a long time, the stone clutched tightly in my hand. I was alone again, but for the first time, the loneliness didn't feel like a sentence. It felt like a choice that had led me to an ally. And I had a feeling, a deep, unshakable certainty that our paths would cross again, and the fate of all the packs would hang in the balance. The spirit of the Wildwood was no longer just a myth. She had an alliance with an alpha, and she was ready for war. The silence of the forest felt different after Rylan left. It was no longer just my refuge. It had become the anvil upon which my destiny was being forged. His words echoed in my mind. Your lack of a wolf may not be a defect, Ilara. It may be a vessel for something entirely different. I clutched the smooth, rune-etched stone he had given me, its warmth a constant, comforting presence against my palm. It was a tangible promise in a world that had only ever given me broken ones. My resolve hardened into a sharp, clear point. The Bloodfang Pack, Kaelin, Lyra. It was time to stop being a ghost in the shadows and become a storm they would not see coming. I spent the next few weeks preparing for my infiltration. I used the knowledge Lyra and the forest had given me to create potent salves from cave moss and bitterroot that could mask my human scent almost completely. I observed the Bloodfang border patrols with a new intensity, mapping their routines, identifying the arrogant ones and the weary ones. I needed to find a way in, not as a warrior, but as something they would overlook. The opportunity came during a violent thunderstorm. The patrols were rushed, miserable, and less vigilant. I saw my chance. A supply cart, its canvas cover flapping in the wind, headed towards the main Bloodfang stronghold. It was filled with rough-spun linens and medicinal herbs gathered from the outskirts. As the cart rattled over a deep rut, a bundle of cloth tumbled loose. I moved like the wind itself, snatching the bundle and melting back into the trees before the driver even noticed. Inside the bundle were servants' garments. Ray and nondescript. It was perfect. Disguising myself was one thing, but entering the lion's den was another. I waited for nightfall, using the booming thunder to cover the sound of my movements. The Bloodfang stronghold was a grim place. Carved into the side of a black mountain, it was all sharp angles and menacing spikes, a testament to Kaelin's brutal philosophy. I slipped through a side entrance used by the servants, my head bowed. My movements subdued. I became a wisp of smoke, a new, silent servant girl no one bothered to look at twice. The inside of the stronghold was even worse. The air was thick with the scent of aggression and fear. Warriors strutted through the halls, their dominance of physical force, while the lower-ranking wolves and servants kept their eyes fixed on the ground. I saw the consequences of weakness everywhere, in the bruised face of a young Omega who dropped a bladder, in the hunched shoulders of an elderly wolf scrubbing the floors. It took every ounce of my willpower not to react, not to reach out. I had to find Lyra. I kept to the lower levels, the kitchens and the laundries, listening to the gossip of the servants. They spoke in hushed, fearful tones of Kaelin's growing paranoia, of his raids on smaller packs, and of his prized possession, a magnificent, ancient she-wolf from the wildwood he kept in a private courtyard. A symbol of his power, my heart leaped into my throat. It had to be her. Finding the private courtyard was the greatest challenge. It was deep within the fortress, guarded by 2 hulking Bloodfang warriors. For days, I could only watch from a distance, my spirit baking. Then I heard a sound that shattered my composure. a low, mournful howl that cut through the clamor of the stronghold. It was a song of grief and resilience I would know anywhere. It was Lyra. The sound was coming from behind the guarded archway. I had to get in there. I couldn't fight my way through, but I could use their own arrogance against them. The next day, I volunteered for a task no one wanted: delivering the raw, bloody meat for the alpha's pet. The cook, a surly beta, shoved a heavy bucket into my hands. "Don't dally, girl, and don't look her in the eye. Kalen doesn't like anyone getting familiar with his trophy." My hands trembled as I carried the bucket toward the guards. This was it. They eyed me with disinterest, stepping aside to let the lowly servant through. I stepped into the courtyard, and my breath caught. It was a beautiful, desolate cage, lush grass, a trickling fountain, but surrounded by walls too high to scale. And there, lying in a patch of sunlight, was Lyra. She was older, her silver-gray muzzle now touched with white, and a heavy, enchanted collar was locked around her neck. But her golden eyes, when they lifted to meet mine, still held that same fierce, intelligent light. She didn't recognize me at first. I was a child when she last saw me. I was now a woman. I set the bucket down slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. I knelt, not breaking eye contact, and I did the one thing I knew would reach her. I hummed. It was a soft, wordless melody, the same one I used to hum when I was a child. Huddled next to her for warmth in our hidden cave, Lyra's head cocked. Her ears twitched. She slowly, cautiously rose to her feet and took a step closer, sniffing the air. I saw the moment recognition dawned. Her eyes widened in disbelief, then flooded with a joy so profound it brought tears to my own eyes. She let out a soft, rumbling whine and pressed her massive head against my chest, just as she had all those years ago. I wrapped my arms around her neck, burying my face in her fur, forgetting for a moment where we were. She was alive. I had found her, but the reunion was short-lived. The sound of heavy footsteps and a familiar, chilling voice from the archway froze the blood in my veins. "What is this?" The voice was like grinding stone, laced with absolute authority. I looked up. Standing there, flanked by his guards, was Alpha Kalen. He was a mountain of a man, with cold black eyes and a scar that ran down the side of his face. His gaze swept over me, the insignificant servant girl, clutching his prized wolf. His expression was not one of curiosity, but of possession and a flicker of dark interest. The guard who had let me in stepped forward, his face pale. "She was just delivering the meat, my alpha." Kalen ignored him. His eyes were fixed on me. "You touch her without fear," he observed. His voice dangerously quiet. "No one touches her without fear." He took a step into the courtyard, and the very air seemed to grow colder. My disguise had just become a very fragile shield. I was inside the stronghold. I had found Lyra, but now I had also attracted the attention of the most dangerous wolf in the kingdom. Time seemed to slow down. Kalen's presence was a physical weight, pressing the air from my lungs. I forced myself to drop my gaze from his, adopting the submissive posture of a terrified servant. My mind raced, a frantic torrent of fear and calculation. One wrong move, one hint of defiance, and I was dead. Lyra let out a low growl, a clear warning, positioning her body slightly in front of mine. She seemed sad, Alpha, I stammered, making my voice small and shaky. I meant no disrespect. I just have a way with animals. Kalen took another step closer. His boots silent on the grass. He circled us, a predator assessing strange prey. Away with animals, he repeated, a slow, cruel smile spreading across his face. My scouts speak of a spirit in the wildwood. A human who commands the loyalty of beasts. They say she has eyes the color of a gathering storm. My blood ran cold. He knew, or at least he suspected. He stopped in front of me again. Look at me. The command was absolute. Brooking no disobedience, I slowly lifted my head, meeting his black, pitiless eyes. I let him see the fear. It was real, but I buried the defiance deep, deep down, behind a wall of terrified submission. He stared at me for a long, agonizing moment, and I felt as if he were peeling back the layers of my soul. You are not from any pack I know, he stated. Your scent is strange, faint, like the forest after a rain. I am an orphan. Alpha, I whispered, the lie tasting like ash. I serve where I can. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Then you will serve here. You will be the sole caretaker for my pet. You will feed her, clean her enclosure, and ensure her continued health. You will report to no one but me. Is that understood? It was both a reprieve and a sentence. He was keeping me close. He was watching me. This was not the plan. I was supposed to be invisible. Now I was under the direct gaze of the Alpha, but it also meant I could be with Lyra. Yes, Alpha, I whispered, bowing my head again. Good. He turned to leave, then paused, throwing one last command over his shoulder. Do not fail me. Girl, the price of failure in my pack is always death. The guards followed him out, leaving me alone in the courtyard with Lyra. The moment the archway was clear, my knees buckled. I sank to the grass. My entire body trembling with the aftershock of his presence. Lyra nuzzled me, a soft, worried sound in her throat. I wrapped my arms around her, drawing strength from her solid, familiar presence. I found you, I breathed into her fur. I finally found you. But the victory was bitter. I was a prisoner in a gilded cage, my fate tied to the whims of a tyrant. My days fell into a new, tense routine. I tended to Lyra, our bond reforged in silent understanding. We communicated through looks and subtle gestures. I learned that the collar around her neck was not just physical, it was enchanted to suppress her will, to keep her docile and trapped. During my duties, I kept my eyes and ears open. I learned the rhythms of the stronghold. I saw the fear Kalen instilled, but I also saw the cracks. There were those who served out of terror, not loyalty. I saw a young warrior, thin, secretly share his rations with an older, injured wolf. I saw the resentment in the eyes of some of the Omegas. The pack was not a monolith of evil. It was a system of oppression, and even the most brutal systems have weak points. My strange, protected status as the wolf whisperer gave me a unique, if precarious, position. I was beneath the notice of the high-ranking warriors, yet I had the alpha's personal attention. It was a dangerous tightrope to walk. One evening, as I was returning from the kitchens, I heard raised voices from a nearby chamber. It was Kalen and his head beta, a cruel man named Goran. "The Stormcrest pack remains a thorn in my side, Kalen," Goran snarled. "Their alpha Rylan survived our ambush. He rallies the smaller packs against us. He speaks of a new alliance." My heart stuttered at the sound of Rylan's name. He was alive. He was fighting back. "Rylan is an idealistic fool." Kalen's voice was a dismissive growl. "He clings to the old ways. Strength is the only alliance that matters." But there is a rumor. The outcasts and the weak whisper of a human spirit who aids them. They say she has the ear of the Stormcrest Alpha. I froze in the shadowed corridor, my blood turning to ice. "A fairy tale," Goran scoffed. "Perhaps," Kalen mused, and his voice took on a thoughtful, sinister edge. "But the new servant girl, she has the storm-gray eyes from the stories. And my wolf feels something when he looks at her, something dormant, powerful. Keep a close watch on her, Goran. If she is this spirit, she may be the key to breaking Rylan's resolve. Every hero has a weakness. We may have just found his." I slipped away, my mind reeling. It was worse than I thought. Kalen didn't just see me as a curious oddity. He saw me as a weapon, a pawn to use against Rylan. The walls of the stronghold felt like they were closing in. I was not just a spy in the enemy's camp. I had become the central piece in a deadly game between two alphas. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that my father's pack, the pack that had cast me out, was somehow tied to the Bloodfang. The past was a ghost, and it was reaching for me with cold, unforgiving hands. The weight of Kalen's suspicion was a constant, suffocating blanket. I felt Goran's eyes on me everywhere I went. A cold, calculating gaze that missed nothing. My every move was monitored. My quiet moments with Lyra in the courtyard were the only islands of peace in a sea of tension. I focused on her, on the problem of the enchanted collar. I began to experiment, using the knowledge of herbs and energies the forest had taught me. I would bring her specific plants, moon petal for clarity, sunroot for strength, and hum my wordless melodies, focusing all my will on the cold, dark metal around her neck. At first, nothing happened. But then, one night under a full moon, I saw it. A faint, almost imperceptible crackle of silver light where my fingers rested against the collar, mirroring the melody I hummed. Lyra felt it too. Her head shot up, her golden eyes wide with shock and a dawning hope. My power, this dormant heart song, was not just for defense. It could heal. It could unravel dark magic. It was a slow, painstaking process, like trying to melt a glacier with a candle flame. But it was working. During this time, I also focused on the cracks within the pack. I started small. I would accidentally leave a bundle of healing herbs near the quarters of the injured elder. I would subtly shift a heavy load for an overburdened Omega when no one was looking. I was a ghost, weaving threads of quiet kindness into the fabric of the pack's despair. The young warrior, Finn, was my most promising contact. I saw the conflict in him, the decency warring with his duty to a brutal alpha. One day, as I was drawing water from the well, he approached me. "You are the one they talk about," he said quietly, his voice low. "The girl who isn't afraid of the alpha's wolf." I kept my eyes on the water bucket. "I am just a servant." "I don't think so," Finn persisted. I was on the patrol that found the she-wolf. She fought like a demon. She never submitted. Not until you came. I risked a glance at him. His eyes were a warm brown, and they held curiosity, not malice. "Perhaps she was just tired of being alone," I said carefully. He was silent for a moment. "Many of us are tired," he finally whispered, before turning and walking away. It was a risk, speaking to him, but it was a necessary one. I needed allies inside these walls. A confrontation I had been dreading arrived on a day thick with fog. I was in the courtyard with Lyra when a group of Bloodfang warriors marched in, led by Gorin. Their faces were grim. "The Alpha demands your presence," Gorin announced. His lip curled in a sneer. Now, my heart plummeted. Had he discovered my attempts to break the collar? Had Finn been caught speaking to me? I followed them, my mind racing, preparing for the worst. They led me not to Kaelin's throne room, but to the main gates of the stronghold. The entire pack seemed to be gathered there, a sea of hostile faces, and standing in the center, before Kaelin, was a man I never thought I would see again. My father. He looked older, his face lined with bitterness and regret. His storm-gray eyes, so like my own, were downcast. He was not here as an ally. He was here as a supplicant. "Alpha Kaelin," my father said, his voice rough. "My pack, the Silvermane, is on the brink of collapse. The Stormcrest Alliance cuts off our hunting grounds. We seek your protection." Kaelin looked bored. "The Silvermane pack is weak. Your bloodline is tainted. Why should I waste my resources on you?" My father flinched as if struck. "We are still strong warriors. We will pledge our loyalty to you completely." "Loyalty is not given," Kaelin said, his gaze sweeping over the crowd and then landing squarely on me. A cruel, calculating light entered his eyes. "It is proven." He pointed a long, thick finger at me. "This servant girl, she is an orphan," she says. But her eyes, they remind me of someone. He looked back at my father. "They remind me of you, Elder Farron." My father's head snapped up. His eyes found me in the crowd. For a moment, there was only confusion. Then, recognition dawned, slow and horrifying. His face paled, his jaw went slack. He was looking at a ghost, at his defective daughter, standing alive and well in the heart of his new master's stronghold. "Ilara?" he breathed. The name, a disbelieving whisper. The entire crowd seemed to hold its breath. Kaelin's smile was a vicious slash of triumph. "So, the stories are true. The defective child you left to die did not die. She survived, and now she serves me." He turned his predatory gaze back to me. "Here is my offer for your loyalty, Elder Theron. Prove your devotion to the Bloodfang. Prove you have purged the weakness from your line." He gestured to a warrior who handed my father a wicked-looking dagger. "Kill her, now, in front of everyone. Prove that the past means nothing to you." The world narrowed to a single, horrifying point. The crowd stared. Goran smirked. Kaelin watched with cold amusement, and my father, the man who had given me life and then tried to take it away, held the dagger, his hand trembling, his eyes filled with a storm of shame, fear, and a desperate, clawing need for survival. He took a step toward me. The daughter he had abandoned now stood between him and his pack's salvation. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of my own heart. Not beating in fear, but in a cold, furious rhythm of betrayal. The past was no longer a ghost. It was a man with a dagger, and it was walking toward me. The air was so thick with tension I could barely breathe. Every eye in the Bloodfang stronghold was fixed on my father and me. The dagger in his hand caught the dull light, a silver shard of our shattered history. His face was a mask of torment, his knuckles white as he gripped the hilt. I saw the war raging within him, the ingrained belief in my defectiveness, the shame of his own action, the desperate ambition to save his pack, and the dawning, horrifying realization that his daughter was not the broken thing he remembered. I did not cower. I did not beg. I stood my ground, my back straight, my storm-gray eyes locked with his. I let him see the woman the forest had forged. I let him see the strength that had grown in the soil of his abandonment. Do it. Farron, Kaelin purred from his throne, relishing the spectacle. Wash away your shame with her blood. Prove you are worthy of the Bloodfang. My father took another shaky step forward. The point of the dagger was now level with my heart. I could see the sweat beading on his forehead. He stammered, his voice cracking. Father, I said, and my voice was calm, clear, and carried a power that silenced the whispers in the crowd. It was not the voice of a victim. It was the voice of the Wildwood spirit. You told me I was defective, that I was a stain. You left me in the forest to die. I took a small step forward, my gaze unwavering. But the forest did not agree with you. It saw something you were too blind to see. It taught me. It protected me. It gave me a family when my own blood threw me away. His arm trembled. The dagger dipped slightly. You don't understand the pressure, the pack. I understand more than you know, I interrupted. My voice softening with a pity that was more devastating than any anger. I understand the fear that makes a man abandon his child. I understand the cowardice that values power over love. I looked past him. At the gathered Silvermane wolves who had followed him here, I saw the confusion and dawning horror on their faces. They had never known the truth. The true defect, I said, my voice rising to carry to every ear, is not the lack of a wolf. The true defect is a heart that has forgotten how to love, a spirit that has traded its honor for survival. My father's face crumpled. The dagger clattered to the stone pavement, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the utter silence. He fell to his knees, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. He could not do it. The weakness Kaelin demanded he purge was the last shred of his own humanity, and he could not cut it out. The spell was broken. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Kaelin's amusement vanished, replaced by cold, furious rage. Pathetic, he spat. You are both weak. You deserve each other. He gestured to his guards. "Seize them. Throw the elder in the dungeons. And the girl." His black eyes burned into me. "Will learn the price of defiance in my pack." As the guards moved forward, a voice, clear and strong, cut through the chaos from the main gate. "There will be no seizures today. Kaelin." All heads turned. Standing at the open gate, flanked by a contingent of stern, powerful Stormcrest warriors, was Alpha Rylan. His amber eyes scanned the scene, taking in my father on his knees, the fallen dagger, and me, standing unscathed but surrounded. His gaze finally landed on me, and in it, I saw a flash of relief and a ferocious, protective pride. "You are not welcome here, Rylan," Kaelin snarled. Rising from his throne, "This is Bloodfang territory. I am here under the ancient law of parley," Rylan stated, his voice calm but resonating with authority. "And I am here for her." He pointed directly at me. The entire stronghold stared in stunned silence. The alpha of the reclusive, powerful Stormcrest pack had just walked into the heart of his enemy's domain to claim a servant girl. Kaelin looked from Rylan to me, and the pieces clicked into place in his mind. The spirit of the Wildwood, the Stormcrest Alpha, the alliance he had feared. His face twisted into a mask of pure, undiluted fury. He had been outmaneuvered. "You would break parley for this human?" Kaelin hissed. Rylan took a step forward, and his power filled the courtyard. A warm, solid force that pushed back against Kaelin's oppressive aura. "I would break 1,000 parleys for her," he said, and every word was a vow. "She is under the protection of Stormcrest." "Harm her, and you declare war not just on my pack, but on every pack that stands for the old ways, the ways of honor." He looked at the gathered Bloodfang and Silvermane wolves. "The time for tyrants is ending." His eyes then found mine again. "Alara, are you ready to come home?" In that moment, surrounded by enemies, with my broken father at my feet and a tyrant seething before me, I felt a peace I had never known. Home. It wasn't a place. It was a person. It was a purpose. I walked away from my father, away from Kaelin, and toward Rylan. The Bloodfang guards, stunned by the turn of events, did not move to stop me. I stopped before Rylan, and for the first time, I did not hide the truth of my heart in my eyes. "Yes," I said, "I am ready." As we turned to leave the stronghold, Kaelin's voice, dripping with venom, followed us. "This is not over, Spirit. This is war. And I will make sure you watch everything you love burn before I end you." We walked out of the gates, leaving the darkness of the Bloodfang behind. But I knew Kaelin was right. It wasn't over. It was only the beginning. A battle for the soul of the Wolf Kingdoms had just been declared, and I was no longer a servant, a spy, or a spirit. I was a catalyst. And I was ready to fight for the future Rylan believed in, a future I now believed in. 2. The silence that followed our exit from the Bloodfang stronghold was not one of peace, but the calm before the storm. We moved quickly, Rylan's warriors forming a protective circle around us as we descended the Black Mountain. The air itself felt lighter, cleaner, but the weight of Kaelin's threat clung to me like a shroud. Once we were a safe distance into the forest, Rylan called a halt. He turned to me, his amber eyes searching my face. "Elora," he said, his voice low with a concern he had not shown in front of the enemy. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head, my own voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through me. "No, but Lyra is still in there. The color, it's enchanted. I was working on it, but I need to go back for her." Ryland's expression was grim, but understanding. "We will get her back, I promise you. But we cannot charge back in now. Halen will be expecting that. His defenses will be at their strongest." He placed a hand on my shoulder, his touch a grounding force. "You have done the impossible. You have walked into the heart of our enemy and emerged unscathed. Now we must be strategic." He was right. The reckless part of me, the part that had been forged in solitude and fueled by a decade of defiance, wanted to turn around that instant. But the part of me that had learned from the forest, the part that had planned and observed, knew he spoke the truth. "We need an army," I said, the realization settling upon me. "Not just Stormcrest. We need the small packs, the outcasts, the ones who are tired of living under Kalen's boot." A slow, proud smile touched Ryland's lips. "That," he said, "is exactly what I have been building. But they are scattered and afraid. They need a symbol, a rallying cry." His gaze was intent on me. "They need the spirit of the wildwood. They need to hear your story." The thought of standing before crowds, of being seen, sent a tremor of my old fear through me. I had always worked from the shadows, but the young boy I had saved, the servant in the Bloodfang kitchens, Finn's conflicted eyes, they all deserved more than just a ghost. They deserved hope. "Then I will tell it," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I will tell them all." Our journey to the Stormcrest Mountains was a revelation. Where the Bloodfang lands were bleak and oppressive, Stormcrest was breathtaking. The air was crisp and thin, filled with the scent of pine and snow. The Pack's settlement was built into the mountainside. Not carved from it, but woven into it with graceful, organic architecture of wood and stone. It was a place of strength and beauty, not intimidation. As we entered the main village, wolves of all ages stopped to watch. Their gazes were not hostile, but filled with a deep, resonant curiosity and respect. They bowed their heads to Rylan, but their eyes lingered on me, the human, the one their alpha had brought home. Rylan did not take me to a dungeon or a servant's quarter. He led me to a spacious dwelling built around the trunk of an ancient, towering pine. A wide window looked out over the vast expanse of the forest below. "This is for you," he said simply, "for as long as you wish it to be." It was more than a room. It was a sanctuary. For the first time since I was 8 years old, I had a door I could close, a space that was truly mine. The gesture undid me. I stood in the center of the room. Tears I have thought long dried up welling in my eyes. Rylan watched me, his presence a quiet comfort. "You are safe here, Elora. You are home." That night, a feast was held in the great hall. It was not allowed. Raucous affair like the silver mame celebrations of my childhood, but a warm, communal gathering. The hall was filled with the sound of quiet conversation, storytelling, and music. I sat beside Rylan at the high table, feeling countless eyes upon me. When the time came, Rylan stood. The hall fell silent. "My people," he began, his voice carrying easily through the space. "For too long, we have watched from our mountains as a shadow of tyranny has fallen over our world. The Bloodfang pack under Kalen seeks to dominate, to crush, and to destroy all that does not conform to his brutal vision of strength." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But a tree cannot grow strong in poisoned soil. True strength does not come from fear. It comes from unity, from honor, from the courage to protect those who cannot protect themselves." He turned and gestured to me. "Many of you have heard the whispers. A legend of a spirit in the wildwood. Today I tell you that she is not a legend. She is real. Her name is Elara. She was cast out by her own pack for the crime of being different. She was left to die in the Shadowfang forest as a child." A ripple of shock and outrage went through the crowd. "But she did not die," Rylan continued, his voice swelling with passion. "The forest took her in. It taught her, and she, in turn, became its protector. She has defended the weak from the strong. She has shown mercy where our kind has shown none. She walked alone into the Bloodfang stronghold and faced Kalen without flinching. She is the living, breathing testament that our way is the right way. That strength has many forms." He looked down at me, his amber eyes blazing with conviction. "Elara, will you stand with us? Will you help us show the wolf kingdoms that there is another path?" Every eye in the hall was on me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I saw doubt in some faces, hope in others, and in Rylan's, an unshakable belief. I thought of Lyra waiting in her cage. I thought of my father, broken in a dungeon. I thought of the spark that had kept me alive in the frozen clearing. I stood. I was not tall, not compared to the wolves around me, but I stood with the straight-backed confidence the wilderness had given me. "My name is Elara," I began, my voice clear and steady, carrying to the far corners of the hall. "And everything Alpha Ryland has said is true. I am the child who was thrown away. For years I believed the words spoken over me, that I was defective, nothing. I let my gaze sweep over the crowd, meeting the eyes of those who looked skeptical. But the forest does not care for the prejudices of wolves. It only cares for the strength of the spirit. It taught me that power is not just about the tooth and the claw. It is about the resilience of the root that cracks stone. It is about the silence of the hunter and the song that can soothe a wounded soul." I took a step forward, my voice growing stronger, infused with the power of my heart psalm. "Kalen believes his way is the only way. He is wrong. I have seen the cracks in his fortress. I have seen the wolves within who hunger for something better. They are not our enemies. They are our brothers and sisters lost in the dark. We will not conquer them with greater brutality. We will liberate them with a greater truth." I raised my chin, the spark inside me blazing into a visible, silver light that flickered in my storm-gray eyes. I stand with Alpha Rylan. I stand with Stormcrest, not to destroy the Bloodfang, but to save what they have forgotten, to save my friend, to save them from themselves. For a moment, There was absolute silence. Then, a single wolf, an elder with a deeply lined face, stood and placed his fist over his heart. Then another, and another. Soon, the entire hall was on its feet. Not roaring, but offering a deep, resonant hum of agreement, a sound of unity, of acceptance. Rylan looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw not just the respect of an ally, but the dawning of something deeper. Something that warmed me from the inside out. The feast ended, but the work began. In the days that followed, I became a different kind of spirit. I trained with the Stormcrest warriors, not in shifting or claw-to-claw combat, but in stealth, strategy, and using the terrain. I shared every detail I knew about the Bloodfang stronghold, the guard rotations, the weak points in the walls, the location of the dungeons, and Lyra's courtyard. Rylan and his betas pored over the maps, incorporating my knowledge. A plan began to take shape. It was not a full frontal assault. It was a plan of precision and heart. "We strike during the lunar gathering," Rylan said one evening in his strategy room. "It is the one night all packs, even those allied with Bloodfang, are invited to a truce ceremony at the sacred standing stones. Kalen will be there, and he will take most of his strongest warriors with him to display his power." "It's the perfect time to infiltrate the stronghold," I said, understanding immediately. The defenses will be lighter. We can free the prisoners. We can free Laura. And, Rylan added, a determined glint in his eye, we can reveal Kalen's true nature to every alpha gathered there. We will show them the collars, the dungeons, the evidence of his tyranny. We will break his alliances in a single night. It was a bold, dangerous plan. Everything hinged on perfect timing and the element of surprise. The night before the lunar gathering, I found myself standing on the ledge outside my dwelling, looking down at the forest that had been my home for so long. It looked different from up here, smaller, yet more connected to the wider world. Rylan found me there. He stood beside me, his presence a quiet comfort. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. "I have to be," I replied. "For Lyra." He was silent for a moment. "When I saw you in that courtyard, standing before your father and Kalen, I have never seen such courage." He turned to me. "You are the most remarkable person I have ever known." Elara. The space between us crackled with unspoken feeling. The alliance, the strategic partnership, had deepened into something far more personal. I looked up at him, at the strong lines of his face in the moonlight. And I knew I was not alone in this feeling. "Without your belief in me," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "I would still be a ghost in the trees. You saw a leader when I only saw an outcast." "Because I was not looking with the eyes of a wolf," he said. Stepping closer, I was looking with the heart of a man who has waited his whole life to find his equal. His hand came up to gently cup my cheek. His touch was warm, sending a shiver through me that had nothing to do with the cold mountain air. He leaned in slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away. I didn't. His lips met mine, and it was not a claiming, but a promise. It was a seal on our alliance, a testament to a bond forged in trust and shared purpose. It was gentle and fierce all at once, and it felt like coming home to a place I had never known. When we parted, the world felt new. The upcoming battle still loomed, dark and dangerous, but now I had more to fight for than survival or vengeance. I had a future to claim. As we stood together under the vast, starry sky, I knew the final lesson the forest had to teach me was not about survival, or even about fighting. It was about love, and that was a power no wolf, no matter how brutal, could ever defeat. The lunar gathering was tomorrow. The fate of the wolf kingdoms would be decided, and I, Ilara, the defective human, would be at the very heart of the storm. The dawn of the lunar gathering arrived, painted in hues of rose and gold that belied the tension coiling in the air. The Stormcrest stronghold was a hive of quiet, purposeful activity. Ryland's plan was set in motion. He would depart with a contingent of his most diplomatic warriors for the sacred standing stones, a mask of neutrality firmly in place. My team, led by the steady beta, Kaelin, and including the now loyal Finn, who had defected from Bloodfang, would infiltrate the enemy stronghold under the cover of the ceremony. Ryland found me as I was checking my gear, a simple, dark tunic and trousers, my hunting knife, and pouches of herbs and poultices. Lyra's runestone was warm against my skin. "Remember," he said, his voice low. "In and out. Free the prisoners. Free Lyra. Do not engage unless you have to. The moment you have them, signal. We will create the diversion at the gathering." I nodded, my throat tight. The memory of his kiss, a brand of warmth from the night before, gave me courage. And you, Kaelin, is not a fool. He will be expecting a trick. A grim smile touched Ryland's lips. Let him. His arrogance is his blind spot. He expects a challenge of strength. He will not expect the challenge to be one of truth. He cupped my face, his amber eyes burning into mine. "Come back to me, Ilara." "I will," I vowed. It was a promise I intended to keep. We parted then, two streams flowing toward the same ocean from different directions, as my team and I slipped into the shadowed paths of the forest. The familiar silence of the wild settled around me. I was no longer just Ilara of the Wildwood. I was a general leading a raid, a friend on a rescue mission, a woman fighting for a future she had only just dared to imagine. The Bloodfang stronghold was eerily quiet. As predicted, the bulk of its warriors had left for the lunar gathering. The few who remained were lax, their discipline eroded by the assumption of safety. Finn's knowledge of the patrol routes was invaluable. We moved like ghosts, a shadow unit flowing through the fortress's arteries. Our first objective was the dungeons. We found my father, Firin, in a cold, damp cell. He looked up as we entered, his eyes widening in shock when he saw me. "Ilara?" he whispered, his voice raw. "You came back?" "Not for you," I said, my voice cold, as I worked on the lock with a set of picks Finn had provided. "You are a means to an end. You will stand at the gathering and tell the truth. All of it." The lock clicked open. He stared at me, a broken man seeing a ghost, wreathed in vengeance and purpose. He simply nodded. We freed the other prisoners. A handful of defiant Omegas, a scout from a rival pack, all bearing the marks of Kaelin's cruelty. Their eyes, filled with a mixture of fear and desperate hope, fueled my resolve. Then it was time for Lyra. We reached the private courtyard. Only one guard stood at the archway, bored and distracted. A swift, silent takedown by Kaelin the Beta, and the path was clear. I rushed inside. Lyra was on her feet instantly. Sensing my presence, her golden eyes locked with mine, and she let out a soft, eager whine. I went straight to her, my hands going to the cold, dark metal of the collar. "It's time," I whispered, pouring all my focus. All my love, all my burgeoning heart-song power into my touch. The silver light flickered around my fingertips, stronger now, no longer a spark, but a steady flame. The ancient enchantment fought back. A slithering, oily darkness. I hummed our melody, the song of the cave and the storm, the song of a girl and her wolf. The silver light flared, bright and pure. With a sound like shattering ice, the collar cracked and fell from her neck. Clattering to the stone pavement, Lyra threw back her head and let out a howl. It was not a sound of mourning, but of freedom, of power restored, of a queen reclaiming her throne. The very air in the courtyard vibrated with its force. It was our signal. I pulled the rune stone from my tunic, clutching it tight. "Rylan," I breathed into it. "Now." At the sacred standing stones, the atmosphere was thick with forced civility. Alphas from a dozen packs stood in a circle, their wolves uneasy beneath the full moon. Kaelin held court, boasting of his pack's strength and the unity he was forging. Rylan stood calmly, waiting. The moment he felt the faint, psychic tug from the runestone, he stepped forward. "Kaelin," Rylan's voice cut through the boasting, clear and sharp. "You speak of strength and unity, but what of the strength found in mercy? The unity found in honor?" Kaelin sneered. "Do not bore us with your philosophies." "Rylan, strength is power. Unity is submission." "Is it?" Rylan countered. He gestured to the forest edge. "Then let us see the truth of your strength." On cue, my team emerged from the trees, leading the freed prisoners. Gasps rippled through the gathered alphas. The true shock came when Lyra walked by my side, her head held high, her silver fur gleaming in the moonlight, the broken collar in my hand. And behind me, head bowed, not in submission, but in shame, was my father Farron. Kaelin's face contorted in fury. "This is a farce! An ambush!" "This is a reckoning," I shouted, my voice empowered by my heart song. Ringing with an authority that silenced the crowd, I held up the broken collar. "This is Kaelin's unity, an enchanted collar to break the will of a noble creature. These," I pointed to the freed prisoners, "are the weak he crushes to feed his ego." I turned to my father. "And this man, my father, will tell you the cost of believing in Kaelin's poison dream." Farron lifted his head, his voice trembling but clear. I cast out my own daughter, my Alara, on the lie that she was defective. I did it to curry favor with the Bloodfang, to save my pack from his wrath. I was a coward. Kaelin's world is built on the backs of cowards and the bones of the innocent. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a profound, agonizing regret. She is not defective. She is the strongest of us all. The revelation was an earthquake. The gathered alphas stared, their allegiances shifting visibly. Lies! Kalen roared, his form shimmering as his control snapped. He began to shift into his massive, black-furred wolf. I will tear the truth from your throats. Chaos erupted. The sacred clearing became a battlefield. Kalen's loyalists surged forward, clashing with Ryland's warriors, and the alphas who now sided with him. It was a brutal, chaotic melee of tooth and claw. Kalen ignored them all. His target was me. He lunged across the circle, a monster of shadow and rage. His sole purpose, to extinguish the light that had exposed him. Ryland moved to intercept him, his own powerful brown wolf meeting Kalen's midair in a crash of muscle and fury. They were a whirlwind of violence, two alphas fighting for the soul of their world. I stood frozen, watching the love of my life battle a tyrant. I saw Ryland falter, a gash opening on his flank. Kalen was bigger, fueled by a deeper, darker hatred. You are a vessel for something entirely different, Ryland's voice echoed in my mind. This was the moment. This was the great need. I closed my eyes. I stopped trying to be a wolf. I embraced what I was. I reached down into the well of power within me, the power that had protected Lyra, that had healed Ryland, that had broken the dark enchantment. I thought of the forest, its resilience. I thought of Lyra's loyalty. I thought of Ryland's belief. I thought of the spark in the frozen clearing that had refused to die. I opened my eyes, and I did not shout. I sang. It was not a melody, but a wave of pure promise. Silver energy that erupted from me. It was the heart song fully realized. It did not harm the allies, but washed over them like a strengthening tide. But for Kalen and his loyalists, it was a physical force. A blast of pure truth that struck their spirits. Kalen stumbled, his charge broken. He clutched his head, howling in confusion and pain. The lie of his own strength was being reflected back at him. And it was agony. His loyalists recoiled, their fighting spirit shattered. In that moment of stunned vulnerability, Ryland struck. With a final, powerful surge, he pinned Kalen, his jaws closing around the tyrant's throat. Not to kill, but to submit. The fighting stopped. The silence returned, heavier than before. Kalen, defeated and broken, shifted back into his human form, kneeling in the dirt. The war was over. In the days that followed, the wolf kingdoms began to heal. Kalen was imprisoned, his pack disbanded and absorbed under the fair rule of a council led by Ryland. The tales of the spirit of the wildwood and the heart song that had felled a tyrant spread like wildfire. Becoming legend. My father, Theron, abdicated his position and left the Silvermane pack under new leadership. Before he departed, he came to me. I can never undo what I did, he said, his voice thick. But I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the daughter who survived me. You have shown more grace than I deserved. I nodded, offering no forgiveness but accepting his remorse. Some scars were too deep to heal completely, but they could learn not to bleed. The greatest ceremony was held at the Stormcrest Peak. Under the sunlit sky, surrounded by all the united packs, Ryland stood before them, not as a solitary alpha, but as a leader of a new alliance. We stand at the dawn of a new age, he declared, an age not of one pack's dominance, but of shared strength. And there is one to whom we owe this future. He turned and held his hand out to me. Ilara of the Wildwood. You who were cast out have brought us together. You who were called defective have shown us our true strength. My equal, my partner, my heart, he notes before me, not in submission, but in offering. Will you rule beside me? Not as a hidden spirit, but as my Luna. The world held its breath, Lyra standing proud at my side. Nudged my hand gently. I looked out at the sea of faces, wolves of all packs, Finns smiling warmly, the freed prisoners standing tall. I saw a future of belonging, not in spite of my differences, but because of them. I placed my hand in Ryland's. Yes, I said, my voice clear and sure, carrying on the mountain wind. He stood, and as he did, he pulled me into his arms and kissed me, a seal of our partnership before all. The cheers that erupted were not just for their alpha, but for their Luna, the human who held the heart of a wolf, the girl who had been left in the cold, and the woman who had remade the world with the power of her spirit. The wind that swept across the Stormcrest peaks was no longer the biting, lonely gale of my memory. It was a chorus, carrying the scent of pine and snow, the distant sounds of a thriving pack, and the profound, humming peace of a world set right. I stood on the ceremonial ledge, the same one where Rylan had first kissed me under the stars, and looked down at the tapestry of my life, woven from threads of shadow and light. Below, the forest of my exile stretched out, a sea of deep green and autumn gold. It was no longer a monster, but a cherished mentor. Every scar I bore, every skill I possessed, every ounce of resilience in my soul was a gift from its wild heart. I could almost see the hollow beneath the ancient oak, not as a tomb of a forgotten child, but as the cradle of a queen. The clearing where my father had abandoned me was now hallowed ground, a place where visiting packs came to remember that true strength is born not from perfection, but from the will to overcome brokenness. The memory of the cold was a phantom touch, a whisper I could finally acknowledge without flinching. It had been the first thing I ever truly understood. Now, I understood its purpose. It had frozen the weak, frightened girl I had been, preserving her until she was strong enough to thaw into the woman I was meant to become. A warm presence brushed against my side. Lyra, her silver fur, now streaked with the noble gray of age, glowed in the afternoon sun. She leaned her massive head against me, her golden eyes holding the wisdom of the wild and the deep, unwavering love of a mother. She had not just saved me. She had raised me. She had taught me the language of the earth and the silence of the hunt. The greatest victory of the war was not Kaelin's defeat, but this, seeing her run free through the mountain meadows. Her collar gone, her spirit unbound, revered by all as the soul of Stormcrest. She worries you stand alone too often. A voice, warm and familiar, spoke behind me. I turned, a smile already gracing my lips. Rylan. He was not dressed as a warrior alpha today, but in simple, soft leathers, his amber eyes holding a softness reserved only for me. He came to stand beside me, his shoulder brushing mine, his presence the final, solid anchor in my world. "I'm not alone," I said, my hand finding his. "I'm remembering. It's important to remember where the song began, so you can appreciate the symphony." Below us, the unified packs were gathering for the annual Remembrance Feast. It was not a celebration of victory in battle, but of survival, of unity, of new beginnings. I saw Finn, now a confident Gamma of the reformed Bloodfang territory, laughing with a group of young warriors. I saw members of the Silvermane pack, their heads held high under a new, just alpha, sharing stories with Stormcrest elders. The air thrummed with a vibrant, living harmony. The defiant spark I had nurtured in the dark had indeed become a flame. And it had not burned the world down, it had illuminated it. "They look to you, you know," Rylan said softly, following my gaze. "Not just as my Luna, but as their North Star, the child of two worlds who showed them a third path." He was right. I was no longer Ilara, the defective human. I was Ilara, Luna of Stormcrest, the heart singer, the spirit made flesh. But those titles were just echoes. In my soul, I was still the girl of the forest, the one who understood the cold, and that was my greatest strength. "Are you ready?" Rylan asked, his thumb stroking my knuckles. Tonight, I would do more than just stand beside him. Tonight, I would perform the first official heart song ceremony. Not as a weapon, but as a blessing, a weaving of light and hope to seal the bonds between the packs for the year to come. It was a daunting responsibility to channel such power intentionally with peace in my heart instead of fury. I looked from the forest to the mountains, from my past to my future, and finally into the eyes of the man who had seen my worth when I was blind to it. "I am ready." As we walked down from the ledge, hand in hand, Lyra pacing regally beside us, the unified howl of the gathering packs began to rise. It started low. A rumble from the Bloodfang contingent was picked up by the clear, strong voices of Stormcrest, and joined by the melodic tones of the smaller packs. It was a sound that once would have terrified me, the sound of the wolves who had cast me out. Now it was the sound of my family. It was the song of the pack. And as we reached the edge of the great gathering, thousands of eyes turned to us, to him, their strength and shield, and to me, their heart and song. Rylan released my hand, giving me the space to step forward, alone. I closed my eyes, not in fear, but in focus. I reached for the well of power within me, and this time, I did not have to search for it. It flowed up to meet me, a river of liquid silver light, warm and boundless. I began to hum, the same simple melody from my childhood, the one I had shared with Lyra in our cave. But now, it was no longer a lonely tune. It was a thread that connected me to every soul present. I opened my mouth, and the heart song flowed out, not as a destructive wave, but as a gentle, shimmering tide of light. It washed over the crowd, and I felt it, the healing of old wounds, the solidifying of new friendships, a quieting of fears, the blossoming of hope. It was a blessing of belonging. When the last note faded, The silence was profound, reverent, and then, as one, every wolf, from the oldest elder to the smallest pup, bowed their heads to me. It was not a bow of submission, but of respect, of love. Rylan came to my side, his pride and love for me a tangible force. He did not need to say a word. As the feasting began and the music started, he led me to the center of the great circle, under the vast, star-dusted sky. In the sight of all our people, he took me in his arms and we danced. It was not a dance of court, but a slow, turning dance of two souls perfectly aligned, our movements speaking of a partnership forged in fire and tempered in peace. A little girl who had been left to die in the frozen dark was now a Luna, dancing in the starlight, her song the binding force of a united kingdom. The cold was gone, replaced by a warmth that would last a lifetime. I had come home, not to a place, but to a purpose, not to a pack, but to a family. The song of my life had begun in a minor key of sorrow and solitude, but it had swelled into a major symphony of love, acceptance, and unshakable strength. And as I rested my head on Ryland's shoulder, surrounded by the howls and laughter of my people, with Lyra's watchful, loving gaze upon us, I knew with every fiber of my being that the greatest song was yet to come. Our story was not ending. It was an eternal melody, and this was just the beginning of the next beautiful verse.